All right. Hey, 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 Crown Nation. Welcome to Rock the Crown. Tonight is the Love Night segment. We are so happy to have you here with us tonight. And tonight we have some special guests with us. So we are going to introduce our special guests, but what we want to make sure that you have in your seat is number one, a tall drink, okay? Because this conversation, you might get a little thirsty, right? And not only that, you also need a partner. So if you have your partner, you haven't had this conversation, or you'd like to have your conversation, go get your partner, sit in front of the computer and be able to watch this. And sometimes I'm encouraging you to connect your computer to your TV so you can see us in a large screen. So as people are coming on into the room, we're asking that you share this segment with your friends and family from our Rock the Crown page to your personal pages. So tonight I am Naima here with my queens, Nafisa and Nefertari. We also have our four brave gentlemen guests. We have Masood, Mr. Colin, Rashid, and we also have Mr. Ross Kofi with us tonight. Hello, everyone. So
hello, thanks for having me.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about this very serious and adult topic, intimacy, which, as we heard in the words of Imam Fahim Shuaib, into me you see. So we're going to be delving deep into this soul experience, a soul connection between men and women, and what happens with those soul experiences and connections. And so we're going to start off, and again, very fluid conversation, talking about how to create intimacy, right? But we want to first ask the question from everyone on the panel, what is intimacy? Nafisa, you want to start us off with that?
You want me to? I don't think you want me to start it off. I don't think you want me to start it off. I think you might want somebody else to start this one off. When you talk about what is intimacy, and I think when you talk about what is intimacy, at the end of the day, it's about connecting, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about connecting and having a connection. And specifically tonight, we're talking about connecting with your spouse, connecting with your life partner. We're talking about, this is the kind of relationship we're talking about tonight. We ain't talking about the friend connection. So we're talking about this connection tonight. So I would just say at the base level, that's basically what we're talking about. That connecting with the spirit, that connection with the soul, that's what intimacy at the base level is about.
And I'll just add to that as intimacy being something that you have when you're close to someone. So it's like an up close and personal type of relationship. And actually, it's not just for the man or woman. It could be for anyone that, it could be, a parent with a child. But, I know we're focusing on a man and a woman here, but just up close and personal. It could be a friendship. And so just having that bond, that special bond, intimacy, starts deep. It can be, as small as a handhold to, just sitting together or laying on each other's shoulder, being able to really search and deep delve inside of each other on knowing those deep things about each other and being able to be yourself with that person. So I would say intimacy definitely starts there.
And I also would like to add, what we're really here for tonight is to hear from the men. I mean, ladies, we know we want to say, but we want to hear what the men got to say from their perspective, because we talk amongst each other all the time. So I don't know which one of y'all want to be the first one to volunteer on that tonight, but we want to hear what the men think about this whole thing about intimacy.
I can start it off. First of all, I'll just come from my spiritual background at first. And I would look at the source. I would look at the original example of Adam and Eve. And I would specifically go to the Bible. And I'll just quickly read where it says, the man said, in other words, Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That to me sums up intimacy between a man and a woman. It's not just a sexual thing, we tend to immediately run to sexuality when we're talking about intimacy. It's bigger than that. It's deeper than that. It's your innermost. It's that synchronization, that simpatico that we are striving for between a man and a woman. And the beautiful thing about it, it's not a straight line. So there are going to be bumps and mistakes along the way on that journey. And it's also beautiful because it will never be perfected. It's a goal and you are reaching and you are striving for that. But if it was perfected, then that's the end of the journey. So that's the beautiful thing about it. That intimacy journey is never perfected. It always keeps you wanting to perfect it, striving for more. That's my perspective. Flowery words, extremely difficult to achieve in the real world because it requires, me speaking personally, it requires me to be vulnerable, to sacrifice, to be transparent, all of those things that growing up I was told were weak, things that a man is not supposed to necessarily show. Just from my background, I'm not judging anybody else's background, just from my background, those were viewed as weak traits. So it's easy for me to define what intimacy, extremely difficult for me to achieve it. I'm still on that journey. And I'm just looking forward to what my fellow men have to say on the subject.
It's interesting what Colin said, vulnerability. That's probably one of the hardest things for men to do, is to be vulnerable with someone, to get that close to someone. They really would have to know you. To become one with someone, you have to let them know the deep, darkest parts of you, not just all the good, but the bad. But vice versa, you have to be willing to accept the same things from her. And then when you're combining as one, the intimacy is more mental than it is physical anyway. The physical comes because the mental is coming together as one. But that vulnerability for me specifically, the hardest part is the being vulnerable.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the wisdom of the two brothers that shared before me, because it's really all been said. I would probably just put it in a different way for argument's sake, and not even argument's sake, but just for the flow of the conversation. That one time, one of my big brothers, an imam, said to me at the beginning of a marriage that, the reason that they say marriage in the Islamic world is half the deen is because the fullness of the deen, the reason for life, is to become one with God. And as it's already been said very poignantly. And to be one with God, one must be as a child. And all of the holy scriptures, regardless of it's the Quran, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you look at, universally, that's a message that comes to the Creator, from the Creator to man, or to humanity, that we must be as babies. We must return to our playful state, which was alluded to earlier as part of what intimacy brings. But we must also be in our innocent state. Babies not just playful, but they're innocent. And to sum up what the brother was saying, there's no way, there's no institution, there's no process, there's no procedure that two people can go through that make them more purified in order to be as babies again than marriage. And that's how I just see intimacy. It's like if you will, it's like taking a sip of the nectar of God, because there's something unique about, there's so many different combinations and elements in the creation, but there's something unique about what we're now referring to as a masculine and feminine energy. And when those two unite, oh my goodness, that's the fullness of life. So that's how I see intimacy, just a little sip, a tiny sip of the nectar of God. And in that, we get to find out, as was said earlier, not only the vulnerabilities from a standpoint of being able to open our hearts and humble ourselves, but also the joy in it. It's not a punitive thing. It's really a great opportunity. And we just find ourselves going through the vulnerabilities to get ourselves to a point where we can purely enjoy it again.
Okay, so remind me to go first next time, you guys, like that. How can I follow this? I would say if there is anything to add, I'll add a little bit of the physical component, but stop short of sex, and say that, I think spooning is a good representation of what like one of the highest levels of intimacy, because scientists have found that in that position, like your hearts are aligned, they begin to sync up, where the heart of the man and the heart of the woman will begin to sync up and beat in synchronicity together, right? And the breathing, the lungs, they start to heave in and out with each other. And that is a microcosm of what true intimacy really is, right? Like it's at one, the man, showing a little bit of his strength and protection of the woman, and the woman showing her femininity and her curves and whatever her sensuality may be, but stopping short of the whatever athletic feats might come after that, right? And you think about that, outside of that setting, and that still would describe intimacy, right? Like that vulnerability that the brothers before me so eloquently described, the ability to let that other person know your true self, not the representative, not the character that you play, in the world, but your true self, letting them in and trusting that they're not going to use what you show them in your real self against you, when things aren't as good. And I think that's the truest form of intimacy.
Now, so I'm gonna ask the question, Masood. I think I want you to go first. But before I ask the question, I want you guys to really think about this. When you think about those 4 elements of intimacy, so think about the emotional aspect of it, mental, spiritual, and the physical. Okay, and so and we might be repeating a few things, but so in what ways have you or would you describe the development of intimacy, whether that's through you personally or just your thoughts on how you see it or other people?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as like as a trust exercise. It's again to kind of hearken on some of the word and language that Scripture has given us. When God says that, when you take one step toward Him, He walks towards you, and when you walk toward Him, He runs towards you. To me, like the building of intimacy is somewhat similar. It's like, all right, I'm going to show you this thing. I'm going to take this step out on this limb, and I'm doing that with the trust or the hope that you're going to reciprocate. Reciprocity becomes a theme that, you want to repeat. Okay, so we're comfortable at this level. Can I be comfortable with you here? What about here? And then the more that person comes, the more, your bond grows and that trust grows. And it's something that goes beyond description, and it's just something that becomes innate, because again, it's a connection of souls.
All right, who wants to go next? We're gonna go with that same question. In what ways have you or would you describe the development of intimacy? Rashid?
Well, first I'm going to say it would start spiritually. If I'm not spiritually connected, then there is no mental. Like if I'm looking for the intimacy, first I had to find a like mind, right? And along with that comes the trust. But when you start building on trust, like what are the foundations that are you building the trust upon? A person, like I said before, being vulnerable, they're letting you know their innermost secrets or the true self. When you meet someone initially, you're meeting their receptionist, and you don't know who that person truly is until you really find those common grounds that you can speak on. But then there are those things that are not so common that you're speaking on. And it's like, is that person going to accept you for who you are? And how do you grow from that? So before I can even get to the physical, there's that mental and spiritual that has to happen first. So I guess to me, the first steps of growing intimacy is finding where is someone's like their thought pattern. How do they think? What are they looking for? who were they prior to meeting me? Who could we be together? You know, because once we come together in that collective mindset becomes more of what the intimacy is, because me being with someone else outside of myself makes me a new self. So, you know, building upon how someone thinks, um, and I'm not saying that you can change someone into something that you want them to be. However, someone needs to also think that they cannot stay the same once we are together, because there's growth that has to happen within the two bodies.
Okay, we're going to go to the next question with Nafisa, and then the other two gentlemen can answer the next two questions. The next question.
Okay, great. This is going along great. And it's so interesting also too how each of the questions and the answers that the brothers are giving, they're kind of feeding into the flow of moving into this question, because you all spoke about trust and a little bit about building trust and developing trust as a path towards intimacy. And this next question kind of basically just builds upon that further by saying this is, what is the secret to being able to show ourselves exactly as we are? What are our defenses and where does true intimacy begin? And I like to mention that by saying that I have this saying that says, just because I'm naked with you doesn't mean I'm naked with you, right? So just because I'm naked with you doesn't mean I'm naked with you. And so that whole idea of being naked with someone, right? In the intimacy sense, right, goes to that whole vulnerability. So I guess with that thought in mind, I want to ask a question like, what do you see as being the secret to being able to show ourselves and truly be naked with someone? Like how do we move to build even further upon that trust?
Well, let me that's a great question. And that's a challenging question. And it's a challenging question from my perspective because I don't necessarily feel that there is a secret from the perspective of sometimes when people say, tell me the secret, what they want is, if what works for you, tell me the secret so that it will work for me. Unfortunately, we're different. And all of us come from a different background, different perspectives, different cultures, different upbringing. So my secret will not fit 100% to work for anybody else but me, because nobody else is me and has walked entirely exactly in my shoes. So there are things that we can point out, but it will always leave somebody else a little bit wanting if I try to give them my secret and then they try to apply my secret to their lives, because it does. We're not math. We're not scientific in that regard. It's just not because if it was, this would have been bottled and sold, and there'd be a bunch of billionaires, trillionaires in the world if they had the secret. It's not that way. Now, having said that, I think one of the things that I've done is unfortunately, and I've let the world, I've let other people sometimes define for me what intimacy means and how it should be and how I should be. I think what would be, if there was some advice I would give, it would be spend time with yourself, get to know your inner self, really get to know you. And there's multiple ways that you can do that. Maybe you need to speak to an objective third party. Maybe you need to speak to a counselor. I don't know. But get to know you. And if you can get to know you in your most innocent, purest, basest form, it allows you to then figure out what might work for you and then perhaps help you find a match or a soulmate because you have a greater understanding of who you are. I think we try to apply the medicine without truly understanding the symptoms and who we really are. We jump straight to the end game without really understanding the source and what's going on inside of us. So I would say focus on a lot on who you are, getting to know yourself, and that will provide the foundation and the baseline to develop what intimacy means for you. And if you can recognize what it means for you, perhaps you can then communicate that effectively to somebody else, and then perhaps somebody else can be successful in that regard, and vice versa. If the other if your spouse or whoever can define, if they understand who they are and can define clearly who they are, we both have a better shot at meeting one another's needs, because we at least can clearly articulate who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, going after any of these brothers is like, it's just a matter, it's a dance of repetitiveness. So I can say it a different way, you know. I think if we approach it, it's a powerful question. The image of being naked. There is definitely something about being innocent there, and innocence meaning a lack of shame. So I think what was said before is completely on point. That at first, the remedy for that, the remedy to be able to exist in that, again, natural state, is to get to know who we are. And if we approach that innocent as our default setting, instead of some kind of mountain, some kind of rocket science, some sociological, psychological thing that we have to now come and learn, it's really our default setting. It's really how we were born. So I think of a quote by Rumi, the poet, who said, your task is not to seek for love, but to seek all the barriers that you've built against it. And that's so deep to me, because again, in this world, we got to go out and get it. Even as we're talking about the innocence, the nakedness, right? How can we go get it? It's actually, how can we remove the toxins that we've placed up in our life against it? Because that is really who we are at bottom, is those beautiful souls that are able to attract and to reflect such grace with one another as with your partner. You know what I mean? Like that's the key to it. And I think it's kind of like as we were coming in, I heard you, Sister Naima, mention, even it's almost like a play on words, like intimacy, into me you see. It was the same thing with insecurity. I could look at it, if I look at homeopathic medicine uses the science of using a little bit of disease to fix the cure. So what's the cure to insecurity, which is the opposite of being able to be naked with someone? Seek you. Again, you get to know yourself. And the more comfortable we are with ourselves, man, it don't even matter what's going on in the world. Some people dancing in the rain butt naked, and ain't because they're crazy or it's indecent exposure. That's just because they're, I'm not telling anybody to go do that on Ponce de Leon or something and catch a ticket, but you understand what I'm saying? That's life. Homeostasis is our default setting. But so much in this world has built us up against that we now have to look at it like our outside goal to go seeking. That's how I would answer that.
I'd like to piggyback on that too, Nafisa, because I think on top of finding yourself, acceptance. You have to accept who you are. That's one big thing. But once you accept that, where I find most men, including myself, is the fear of being that or showing that. So we got to have that courage to be able to expose that to someone. Because once you find yourself, we might know who we are, but wondering if someone's going to accept me for who I am, and I'm saying that that's who I'm going to be, you have to, it's not just being vulnerable, it's having the courage to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there and say, hey, this is who I am, and finding out whether someone's going to accept it. It's almost like believing you know how to swim and then jumping into the pool. Like, am I going to say, yeah, I think I know how to swim, but if I'm not going to jump into the pool and say, okay, I can actually swim, it's the same thing when I'm in a relationship where I'll say, okay, I am who I am, but now I'm going to show you who that is. I'm going to accept it for myself and have the courage to show you the real me, not who I believe that you want me to be. And then we can grow from there.
This is such a beautiful conversation. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I'm filling up with like happiness, right? So then something else we wanted to talk about, the second part of that question is where does our defense mechanisms begin and kind of, you know, where it ends? And I think that maybe Colin spoke about the beginning and ending of that, just being kind of true to yourself, knowing where, you know, hey, if you don't know you, you can't, you can't expect anyone else to know you. And of course, you know, just kind of moving on from trust, right? And then we know that trust has so many different layers for people. But also inside of trust, trusting yourself, I think is most important as well. Sometimes we don't trust ourselves. We misjudge others because we don't trust ourselves. And again, going back to understanding who we are and being able to trust ourselves. So through that process, we want to free ourselves of the big word, the big F word, and that is fear, right? And so trust is kind of like, you know, okay, I can trust if I'm not afraid. And so we've always heard, I don't know, you know, mostly everybody has heard this saying that says, if you're going to pray, then don't worry. But if you're going to worry, then don't pray. Right? So one is about trusting and one is about fear. And so we really have to stack one on top of the other, not both on top of each other, right? And so going into trusting and releasing the fear, the next question that we're going to be asking, at least two of you gentlemen on the panel, is what happens if we truly get to know each other and we don't like what we see? What happens when we truly get to know each other and we don't like what we see? Let's start off with Ross and then finish it up with Masood on this question.
Well, the easy answer is we realize that everything that we don't like in another person is a reflection of something that is unhealed within ourselves. That's a very hard pill to swallow. However, it's so liberating when we finally digest it. You know, and then on a practical level, sometimes if the I don't like what I see really plays out, manifests as a misalignment, then there's times when you have to part ways in that sense. You know, that's another thing. The word courage was used so many times, and that's part of it. You know, but I think the main thing is the first, because if we can see that as a reflection, then we can continue to look internally. And often, I heard one time of, I think it's in Kenya, I might be mistaken, that one of the laws of a couple being able to go through a divorce is they got to dress up in the clothes they wore on their wedding day, right? And go to the courtroom. Psychologically, we know what this brings, because there was something that brought you together, most likely. When it was back in the days in high school or something, it might have been a physical thing. You just wanted to knock the boots, like they say, or whatever, you know, and it could be mutual or whatever. But usually there's something deeper than that that brings one together and really to form a relationship. However, when we start seeing our reflection, it gets really rough. It really gets rough. And just to be clear, for me, the reflection does not mean like, you know, there's in the new age spirituality, they call it the law of attraction. And I think a lot of people kind of dismiss it because it seems like you're saying that, say for instance, somebody broke into my car and stole something, that I attracted this situation to me. That it seems that it's saying that I made this person into a thief. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that I experienced this as a traumatic experience because of what my soul required for its growth. You know what I mean? And that's the same way when you look at something, or we talking about relationships here. We're talking about man and woman, and not beating around the bush, but it's the same principle. It's the same universal principle.
Very well stated, stately as well as always, Brother Ross. I wanted to kind of go back a little bit to some of the points that Brother Rashid and Sister Naima touched on about being comfortable with yourself first and foremost before anything. And once you're comfortable with yourself, it's not to say, it's not a accept me as I am. This is just what it is. And that's just how it's going to be. I mean, obviously you enter into relationships so that you can continue your own personal growth. You seek out people who are able to complement you and the people who are strong in areas that you may be weak. If you're continuously seeking out somebody who's just like you or just like the last person, then you continue to run into the same issues. So we seek people and we seek situations that fill our voids, right? And as long as we're clear about our goals, we're clear about our desires, our pain points, and our deal breakers. It's like, yeah, I'm willing to, explore this relationship with this other human. I'm willing to see what else I can learn, what I can glean from this relationship. But at the same time, my principles, my faith, my family, whatever the case may be, that there's a line that I won't cross, right? That's deal breaker. So when you truly get to know somebody with all of those things in place, and you've communicated that this is how you're approaching this relationship, like I'm seeking for you to fill, a void that I have. A man fills a void for a woman, no matter what the masculinity femininity ratio is. We seek balance in each other, and we're communicative about what we're seeking. We're communicative about what we are willing to, where we can grow, where our weaknesses are, our strengths are, and things like that. And then after all of that, and both people have good intention, and it's all laid back, you're naked, so to speak, to put it in Nafisa's terms, like, and you're standing there and you say, you know what, this isn't it for me. Then I don't feel like there's any shame in that. I think that if you give it your due diligence and you're standing there, it takes the more responsible couple to say, you know what, this isn't it. This wasn't what I was hoping for. And based on what you told me, I'm not what you were needing. And then at that point, it is what it is. Not everyone is for everyone. And so, if lust guided you there, or attraction of some sort, or that person reminded you of somebody else, or it was what you thought it was, but it wasn't. And then when you strip all those layers back and you find out that wasn't the case, then it's actually the responsible thing to do, to say, this isn't it, and we should part ways, at least at this level, at this time.
Can I jump in there? Yeah, this is a tough one, because to truly become intimate takes time. It takes a lot of, you can't put a clock on it and say it's going to be 6 months or a year. It takes time, and it's never ending, because it's never perfected. So let's say you get into, but you make an honest decision. You feel you know yourself, you see somebody, you make an honest decision, and you engage in a marriage perhaps with that person. The Christian teaching would say once you're married, it's very difficult to get a divorce, right? It has to be adultery or something. It can't be just because we're no longer simpatico. So it's very difficult. I think logically it makes sense that if the intimacy is not there, and you've made an honest effort, an honest, you put all your heart and soul into it honestly, and it's just not working, logic would say, okay, let's separate. Why keep on with the pain? But for some people who have that, depending on your background, and let's say you subscribe to some Christian teachings, it would say, well, you just can't get a divorce, because if you then get married again, you're an adulterer. For some people, it's a challenge. So it's not an easy answer. I don't know if I have the answer, but I would just say, at the end of the day, if you're both on a level playing field, and what I mean by that is spiritually, I think spirituality is the foundation. If you're both coming at this from a spiritual foundation basis, and it's a common foundation, I would like to think that there's nothing that we cannot overcome. Now, that might be naive, that might be fantasy. and it won't be easy. So again, I'm not saying it's going to be easy to overcome, but if you're coming at this spiritually and making an honest effort, I would hope that there's nothing that would, that you would not be able to overcome, and that we don't confuse wants, I want this, we don't make things, we don't prioritize things arbitrarily and say, trivialize things. Sometimes, are we really talking about things that really matter, or are we talking about things that don't matter? So I'm not really giving a great answer to that question, because it is a difficult thing. It's difficult to break apart and say, well, we're just no longer together, let's just break it apart, because that's, for some religious teachings, that's not that simple. But I would just like to think that my faith and the faith of the person that I'm with is strong enough that if we're coming at it from a spiritual foundation, I would like to think that we can work it out. It may take a year, it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years, it may take counseling, it may be extremely bumpy, but I would like to think we could work it out.
I wanted to just clarify. I agree 100% with what Brother Collins just said, but I was speaking more from the standpoint of when you first meet somebody, when you're in the courtship process, and you don't get married once you come to that crossroads. If you feel like, I know enough to know that I don't want to try to force this with this person, right? Like that's where I was coming from. I'm a big proponent of premarital counseling, which helps expedite the process of understanding and getting to know one another, and having an outside source, be able to give you hypotheticals, different situations, to dig a little bit deeper into the past, to figure out compatibility issues and things like that. And those are some of the things that help you get to that crossroad prior to marriage. But once you say, okay, I know that I'm compatible, like my ideals line up with yours, my strengths line up with yours, so on and so forth, you jump into marriage, then absolutely, Brother Colin, like, you're not just jumping out of it on a whim because, I'm not feeling this anymore one day. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta tough things out, because you've proven to yourself and an outside party at that point, and you've sworn before the Creator that you're going to make this thing work by any means necessary. So I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't speaking, after you're on the other side of the line, that is marriage, just in terms of
that's good. We are 100% in agreement, because to me, my answer would have been 10 seconds, because if it's prior to marriage and it ain't working, see ya.
Hey, well, those were really good comments. I mean, like, wow, this just really filled me up. When you talk about just being able to fill the voids in relationships and seeking the balance, I think about, like, that triangle that we have, it's God first up here, and then you have, the man and the woman down here. And so you definitely, if you're keeping God first and foremost, then that should ground you, And so my question is kind of like, you've kind of touched on some of the things, but, what if you share everything, but then you feel like you get nothing in return? And then keep it in mind, like you were saying, like when you get married, like you're in it to win it. You got, you don't want to give up easy. You guys have kind of spoken on it a little bit, but let's just get into that just a little bit more on, if you have that feeling of like you're just giving it all, and I don't really believe that somebody can just give their everything and not absolutely be getting nothing back. But if you feel like you're just like, you feel like you're giving, and then you're not getting anything in return, or you're barely getting anything in return, how will you view that? What are your comments on that? Anybody, either one of y'all can jump in on that.
Rashid or Colin?
Unmute yourself.
You're muted.
If I'm going off of what Colin said, and this is prior to marriage, then it's a great way not to go into marriage. Because if I'm not getting what I'm looking for, that's one thing.
Married. Let's say you're married already.
All right, but I've never been there yet, so I can't go from that that perspective.
Really
But getting to the point where you are married, let's say that part, and then your spouse is not giving you what it is that you're looking for. I'm in my mind, once I'm married, I'm married. I'm one of those people. It might take 10 years. It might take a lot of counseling. But if I chose correctly, one of the things on my list is that someone is willing to grow with me. It's not that we're going to be exactly who we are going to become in the future. So until you really exhausted all things, you don't know if the person is going to grow with you or not. I may try to do a lot of things to see what it is that I want, but am I giving her what she wants? Am I the right person for her? Because sometimes I might not get back what I'm looking for because I'm not giving what they're looking for. So I can see someone not giving me what I'm looking for if it's not equally yoked. So I do believe with women that you all have this, it can't always be just for you. Like, what is it in there for me? So if it's one of these one-sided relationships where I'm getting or giving all of what I want to get what I want, that doesn't mean that she's going to be able to give of herself if it's not an equal relationship. So I wouldn't give up right away just because I'm not getting the things that I'm looking for at that time. It might not be my time to get that. It might just be the time where she needs to get the parts that she needs so she can be a better woman for me in the future. It depends on the growth of the individual and the growth of the relationship.
Right, agreed. And at the end of the day, so with the premise that you are already married, and then all of a sudden things, you're not getting, what you need from the relationship. With the assumption that you had done all the premarital counseling and all those things, and you were equally yoked and you did all those things, there are going to be times when you do not feel the relationship is working. It's absolutely going to be those times after your marriage when you feel like I'm not getting what I need. That's going to happen. It's not, we're not robots, and it's just not perfection.
Right.
There's going to be arguments, there's going to be disagreements, there's going to be all sorts of conflict that happens. But again, because you are equally yoked, because you have the right foundations, I feel like you can always have that dialogue. And don't be afraid to seek a neutral expert third party in that situation, because sometimes I might have my blinders on and might not see what it is you're seeing. And so it's very easy for me as the man to maybe discount or invalidate what you're seeing. I can never do that, because at the end of the day, if what you're seeing is what you're seeing, it's what you are seeing. So what I need is somebody else to try and help me see what it is you're seeing. And that might require, talking to a third party, talking to a trusted spiritual advisor, a trusted friend, whoever you need to speak to on that. I would also say take time on that decision. Don't make it necessarily be your girlfriend or your best friend, because naturally there's going to be a feeling of imbalance. You might put the other person on the defensive if they see somebody there who's, well, that's just your girl, or whatever. So you have to spend time on who you select, but by no means think it's going to magically fix itself. It will not. It will get worse. So you do have to address it. You do have to figure out creative ways. I'll just give you, if I'm just going to be open up and, between me and my wife, she knows that the best way when things are going wrong with us, what she will do is write a note, and she will place the note in the place that she knows I will see it, whether it's in my car or whatever. She will place a note in a strategic space. I will read the note, and then we will wait a couple of days before we talk about it, because she knows to come directly at me with the problem is not, I'm going to be on the defense. It's not always going to be the right way to come to me. I might not hear what you have to say. So she's learned over the years and over the time that we've been together, it's best to take some time to articulate what I'm thinking, because writing it lets you think about what it is you want to say. and then she will place it to me. I will take my time to read it. And then when we come together, we're calm, we're open, and we're ready to have a discussion. So I would say when you're not getting what you need out of the relationship, you do need to address it, but you need to be thoughtful about how you address it. And you have to understand the other person in that relationship, how they receive, how they receive information, how they receive something that's not pleasing to you or dissatisfying to you. Because we will naturally have our defensive mechanism. That's who we are. And we're going to have our blinders up. So you got to find a way to maneuver around those blinders. That's all I would say. But it's going to happen. Anyone who thinks they're going to get into a relationship with someone and try to cleave and get to know that person and be with that person for the rest of your life, you're going to have problems. And you just gotta go in there eyes wide open. But just understand that because we coming at this thing spiritually, coming at this thing together, we can work it out. Mm-hmm. And let's remember the foundation that got us here, and let's work it out.
Real talk. If I could just say something real quick, I thought of a song as the brothers were speaking by Millie Jackson. If you're not back in love by Monday, y'all know that song. It's a science to it. In a nutshell, she said, you can call Mrs. Johnson to keep the kids for a day or two and take the early flight to Florida and just reliving some innocent times. That is not necessarily always the practicality to every issue that comes up. However, I offer that as, and I want to be very clear, I'm not attempting to oversimplify it because, for instance, Brother Colin, I know you speak from experience, I've been experiencing in a little bit in this situation before in terms of being married and coming to a place where it's just rough. It just seems like tension. But there's something to be said about just reliving, just going back to your innocence. It's like, I remember one time being in counseling and what the person told me and my mate was we had a couple of issues that we were dealing with. Don't stack. We sitting here mad, came to the session, just both people vexed. She was like, after this session, y'all go out and enjoy each other's company. This is a grown person, a very seasoned person, an intelligent person. You're not just trying to give us some, happy-go-lucky type of talk, but there's a science to it because if we were to stack up stuff, just like imagine if our creator, we're spiritual people, imagine if our creator stacked up all our stuff on us and held it against us. We'd be like ashes, So it's the same thing with each other. And again, that does not circumvent the handling of real issues. It's just that most of the time, if we come to it, another quote that I feel to be poignant and very relevant that I utilize, this is not just something I quote to sound deep or something, is that it's either an act of love or a cry for love. Again, you might come to that crossroad where this person's cry for love is destructive to your life, so we got to part ways. That's natural. However, most of the time, it's something that if you come forward to the heart of the matter, it's something that absolutely not only can be worked out, but can be used as a tool, a stepping stone, so eventually you ain't even got to go through that bump again. It's like you've graduated, you've earned some degrees. Problems, as the Quran says, surely with every difficulty comes ease. Surely we don't just see that as some kind of magic out the sky kind of way. When we look at the science of that, even in our limited wisdom as humanity, that says that there is, in every situation, there's some nutrition, there's some medicine. There's something there that can be learned from it, us to another level. That can take us to another level.
And I would just add, it's not much to add after all of that, but I tell my young mentees, they're not as young anymore, and they're getting to the age now where they're starting to think about, marrying the girl that they with at this time and things like that. And what I always tell them, is like marry the homie, like marry your friend, you know what I mean? Like marry somebody who you just kick it with and y'all laugh, got all kind of inside jokes with it. Not just the one that makes you straighten your shoulders when you get in the room. It's cool if you got that, but make sure that, you have a strong foundation of friendship. You know what I mean? Like, and when you do run into that turbulence, that inevitable turbulence that Brother Colin mentioned, you can shift gears and just talk to the homie. Like, listen, this ain't working for me right now. Like, I needed this and I'm not getting this. And I was expecting this. We used to be able to do this. We used to be able to talk about these things. And the homie gonna understand, you know what I mean? Like, your friend is gonna feel that compassion for you. Like, oh man, how did we get to this point where I'm letting my friend down? You know what I mean? If it's always at odds, like if it's a transactional type of relationship that a lot of, I see like rushed, hasty, unfortunately a lot of marriages, young marriages in Islam end up this way, where people are just saying, hey, I need to be married. So boom, 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 let's just hurry up and get out the way. And they don't have anything established, any underlying foundation to fall back on. And it's just like, you're supposed to cook, I'm supposed to go to work, you're supposed to iron my clothes, I'm supposed to do this. And then it's like, once one of those transactions falls, or, you're supposed to give me sex at the end of the day. And that transactional nature, if that's the basis of your relationship and there's no friendship to fall back on, then it's hard to have those conversations when you do see things start to kind of teeter and veer to the left a little bit. So that's the only thing I would add to what the brothers have already mentioned.
Right. This is such a fantastic discussion. I'm just getting all engrossed in what's going on here. It's great. And as we move forward, I guess I heard Masood talk about him mentoring people in relationships. And that kind of leads us into our question that we have about what are some suggestions do you have for men to be able to open up and trust, or open up and connect? And as well, for us women, how do we give men the space to do that? Do you have, what are some of your all suggestions for that? To be able to create a space for men to be able to have that trust or connection.
For me, it's like any space that you're in. You know what I mean? Like, men have to just be men wherever we are. We have to be comfortable with each other. If we got next on the basketball game and the game is going on right now, and you got a young man who's right there with you, you have to be able to establish those kind of relationships where you're like, what's going on with you? How's your life going? You still with so and so? How's that going? And for the older generations, it's incumbent. Like, I was a at-risk youth that was probably going to be discarded by society, one or two more infractions, but I had people reach back and come grab me, snatch me up by my collar and say, and instill in me what needed to be instilled in me for me to straighten up. So, there's, we can create forums and we can create, all these different atmospheres that are supposed to be, specifically for this thing. Hey, young man, come here and glean this great information that I have. But I think it's more important to just be able to be comfortable in being like an OG, being somebody who can steer the conversation to where it needs to be, because we need somebody who can come behind us and continue to carry the torches that we have lit right now, and to continue to build the institutions that we're building right now. So if we see somebody who has potential, and we see that he's missing some things, and we see that, marriage might be one of those things, or a woman might be one of those things, then we just have to take it upon ourselves to, use the barbershop, use the basketball court, use whatever platform we can to just be that person to snatch them up and tell them. And what I always tell them is just, going back to what Rashid said earlier, is understanding yourself. Like, you can't go into anything unless you understand yourself. So go into a spiritual journey, like, go into a spiritual retreat of yourself, understand who you are fundamentally before you can try to impose yourself on somebody else or a relationship. And trust God, develop that relationship so that you have something to bring, fill your cup up so you can pour it into someone else's. And that's the advice that I give. And, I give it to those young boys, whether they want it or not. And I'm gonna steer the conversation and they'll thank me later.
Real talk. Real talk. Yeah, we got to know our nature and stand in our nature. And part of our nature as men is to give guidance. You know, part of, I mean, we all have these natures, but we're talking about, like, if we're talking about a primary nature and how it practically shows up in society, it takes a village, you know. I know, I'm sure all of us here are the beneficiaries of a village, whether we grew up in the city, in the hood, wherever we grew up. It was a group of people that took it onto themselves that we are going to give this young person some guidance in whatever way. And we cannot afford to not continue that. And it's nothing about being afraid and all that. You know, a lot of stuff happened in the 80s, and especially when crack hit our community, one of those great interruptions of our culture, you know what I mean? Real talk, you know, like chemical warfare hit our community, and people started acting the way we never seen Black folks act before, you know? And then people started being afraid of doing what Brother Masood just talked about, you know, unless it's somebody you really know, you know? I'm grateful for my mama. My mama, she transitioned now. She's an ancestor now. May God be pleased with her. But she was a school teacher. And I thought a couple times I would have to go up and beat somebody up or something. She's a high school teacher. So my mama, if anybody was stepping out of line, she literally grabbed them by their ear. And this is gang banging Southern California, you know? But they all respected it. And I'm saying the same thing for us as brothers, to help, you know, each other along, especially the younger people. We just have to step into our place. That's our natural place. So when we are in our nature, it's not just something to say, okay, we're now in our nature. What happens? A whole universal force is with us because we are flowing according to what we were created to be.
Thank you so much for both of those answers. I just want to say what I really want to know. I mean, that was good and everything. And I like y'all, you know, responses, but maybe I didn't make my question clear. What I want to know is what suggestions do you have for women to be able to give men the space to be more intimate with them? You know, what suggestions do you have to give women, or your brother, to have the space to be more intimate, that space to be more vulnerable? Because sometimes a lot we might come on a little strong. I'm just asking. I don't know if I'm being.
Forget everything you were taught about gender roles from broken people. That's the advice for men too. But if you're asking for the sisters, forget everything you were told, because really expectation is the root of heartache. You know, most of us practice a certain spiritual tradition that we have. There's certain divinely decreed gender roles. I'm not talking about that, you know. However, there's other stuff that we just got all these expectations. Like today, for instance, I don't personally celebrate Valentine, Saint Valentine at all, but I'm absolutely celebrate love every day and Black love and all that kind of stuff. However, think about coming up in high school when that whole expectation built up in you that I'm not only gonna clock and gauge our relationship based on what you give me, but I'm also comparing to what my homegirl got or whatever. And that translates into adulthood as other things. So I would say first thing is just forget about what you're taught and relearn that, because what that does is allow a brother, most likely, one of the things we were taught is that men got to be hard all the time, and you know, warriors don't cry and all this kind of stuff. So for a man, to go back to one of the first questions about vulnerability, men often are made to feel like unmanly by showing their vulnerability from women. And whether we admit it or not, we want to admit it or not, most of what we do, most of the energy we exert in the earth is about the pleasure of women. Because again, that's nature. If God said that we to maintain her and protect her woman, then you want to translate that to however you want to translate it to how that practically looks. But that's what it looked like. Most world wars are fought. When you really chase down to the bottom, it's over a woman. I ain't blaming women for war now. I'm talking about men. All right, just to be clear. But so, yeah, just allow them. forget about that part of it. You know, that whole patriarchal gender role that we were taught by the enemies of humanity.
Anyone else want to comment?
Rashid.
Yes. All right, a few things. One, what you just did, you polled a group of men outside of your spouse. I think, like, I have a female friend, she asks me all the time, like, well, why did this guy do this? You know, I'm trying to get with him. And I'm like, oh, that's how a guy thinks. So sometimes how a male naturally thinks is not what a woman thinks that we think, but that is just a basic nature of who we are. And then it boils down to the communication that you have with that person. If you're not to a point where he feels comfortable with you to be in an intimate type of space, like we have this thing, like the brother just said, where we feel like we have to be hard all the time. So if for the majority of the women that we're speaking to, that's what we're used to doing, you would have to be something other than that. You would have to be someone um uh uh like uh like brother Masood said. He said you have to have this friend. Like if you have this friend, I can tell my friend anything. But if I don't feel like this female is my friend, I'm not telling you nothing. It's just not coming out that way. So if you're close to me, if you were just like a girlfriend from high school, somebody I kicked it with, that's different than having a friend. And I'm saying to her, yo, this is truly how I feel. You can say that to a friend. You couldn't just say that to somebody you were just kicking it with. So if you're in this relationship, make sure you have a relationship with someone that you have a friendship, a true friendship with, because then the communication is more open than just someone that, doesn't want to share themselves with you. Like the fear of a man being vulnerable, it has a lot to do with the trust that we have with the woman that I'm being vulnerable with. So if she's not showing me that I have trust that what I share with her is going to stay between us. When I leave her, I might just act like this strong man that don't got no care in the world. But when I'm with her, I should be able to let down my guard with how I truly feel. Then we can grow together within that. However, if you're trying to build that up, I would say talk to another married man and say, well, how do you do that with your woman? And it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to give you your answer. He might kind of, like he said, you'll get a suggestion, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to give you the true answer. You got to try different things to figure out what truly works. But your best answer is going to come from him. And that's going to come from you having a relationship where the environment is based around the communication that you have with one another. That's where the intimacy really begins, in the communication or the understanding that you have with one another. And then a man, if he feels as though you're the one, because a man can always choose some. I always say when a man meets a woman, he'll know whether or not he's going to marry her or not from the beginning. He might, one of them just might, hey, we kick it, but you'll see potential inside of a woman and say, you know what, this could be my wife. That means that he knows he can be open with you. He'll tell you things that he wouldn't tell his mother, things that he wouldn't tell his sister. And you'll notice that when you see this man giving that to you. So if you're getting with a man that's being totally closed up with you, that should be like warning or a red sign number one that he's not going to open up with you. So if you're choosing a man based on looks, money, or anything like that, you may have chosen a man that's not going to open up with you. And then you're not going to be able to build that trust right away. Not saying it won't ever happen. It might not happen right away. But if a man feels the way that you believe that your husband should be treating you, and he's a person who's looking at you as you could be his wife, you probably see it right away. So look for those things in the beginning when you're courting before you get in a relationship. Because one thing I do know is you can't change a man and to be what you want him to be. He's going to be who he is, unless he's willing to change for you. So that's basically.
Okay, thank you. It's so much, so beautiful. This conversation has been so beautiful. We know that we have, as we said last week, love has no time, right? But we have been on for a solid hour, but we have one final question before we go out. And I think that this is the final question that we want to make sure that every gentleman on the panel answers for us, and then we will definitely close out. But so of course we talked about being vulnerable. We talked about trust. We talked about, letting our armor down, letting our be our true selves, and what happens when you don't see if you don't like what you see after we've gone through all these stages. But the final thing is, like Colin said, it sounds good when you lay it out in a bookstore, it sounds good, all the peachy creamy words and all of that other stuff. But the final thing is, how can we as individuals, and of course, as you as men, how can you develop more self-confidence regarding intimacy? So asking this question, what are some steps? And we know that this isn't for everybody, but what steps would you give to other men to develop more self-confidence regarding intimacy? And let's start with Masood and go all the way down.
This is the one time I didn't want to go first.
Okay. You got it, bro.
All right. So, I mean, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, because I mean, we're human and we're just not as complex as we like to believe we are. I mean, it comes down to knowledge of self. It comes down to, really understanding what you don't know. And if what you don't know is how to interact with a woman, please a woman, be at ease with a woman, then there are resources that you can seek and find that will help you in those avenues, in those ways. So I think just like anything else, if you want to be successful in business, you go and you seek out those who have been successful in business. You go get books and you study. I mean, you can study female anatomy. You can study the female psyche. You can study what women say about what they like in relationships. You can ask your mother, you can ask your sisters. There's so many different resources available to a person who is intentional about, becoming better at intimacy. It's not all esoteric. There are some things that we can do tangibly that will allow us to get closer and at least begin to explore some of the things that have been successful for other people. And then finding, where our personality fits in. Like on a human basis, this is what's worked. But for me, my personality says this, her personality says this. How do we sprinkle those in, try that out, and make it work? And it also comes down to intentions. As an individual, your intentions, if they're pure and if they're really about marriage, or if they're really about finding your soulmate or your twin flame or whatever you want to call it, then like Ross said before, the law of attraction will manifest what you actually want, right? So if you're intentional about doing the tangible things, the esoteric things will take care of themselves.
Colin?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure I can add much more to that. I mean, at the end of the day, how do you get more confident? I think you just have to be willing. You have to be willing to stretch yourself. You have to be willing to challenge yourself. Don't always try to stay safe. See, we try to stay within our little box, and when I know this, and because I know this, I want to stay, and I'm confident in this. But it's growth, and if you really truly want to grow, then you have to have that confidence to stretch yourself and to challenge yourself, and know that it's not always about necessarily just the right way. It's about pushing yourself and growing and just being willing just to take that risk, and that's hard. That is a hard thing, for especially a man to deal with that unknown, that fear factor that we have about, looking foolish or being embarrassed or, not sure of ourselves, because we always like to be sure. But then to me, that's kind of the easy way out. If I'm sure about something, of course I'm going to be confident. But building confidence requires putting yourself in some uncomfortable situations and growing. And as you grow and put yourself in those situations, your confidence will grow, and then you'll be willing to try the next experience and the next experience. Otherwise, what's the point? We have no opportunity of cleaving and growing together if we don't try some experiences. But that's it takes, to me, that's what confidence is. The confident to be willing to put myself out there and take a chance. Not an easy thing to do, but it's the only way. It's the way to develop ourselves.
Rashid?
I believe one of the first things that of a suggestion would be for you to define what does intimacy mean to you, or what are you looking for inside of intimacy. Just like Colin said, you got to have the courage to know that you need to grow into something that you don't already have. If you're not in this relationship already, you're creating something that doesn't exist. And from the very beginning, we talked about being vulnerable, but it's more than just being vulnerable. It's the willingness to achieve what you're looking for. So I would say step out of yourself, have some type of outline of what you're looking for. Because if you're talking to someone without knowing what you're looking for, it's like going to the grocery store hungry. You're just picking up anything that you see because you're just hungry, and you're not really going to get what you're looking for. However, if you have a good idea of what does that intimacy look like for you, and you're willing to grow to become that, and like I said, just jumping into the water once you understand that you know how to swim.
And Brother Kofi?
Practice, practice. And that sounds crazy if you dealing with a human being, but I know a woman who will never run you away and whose love is going to get you, it could only get you much better for any spouse you're going to deal with, and that's the earth. And I'm a farmer myself, and I'm talking from experience. Touch the earth. Touch the earth. Our Lord has put something there chemically, very tangibly, as Brother Masood said. We're not talking esoteric at all. Tangibly. There are healing microbes in the earth. As I speak to brothers all the time when we're having discussions and, we're talking about farming, I'm teaching them how to farm, or, basics of gardening or whatever. And we ask, well, how many people y'all are married and everything? And this is a means, I bring this conversation up as a means of getting an agricultural point across. And, people raise their hand. Well, I say, well, when the inevitable happens that you and your mate have some kind of disagreement, you go out in the garden, you observe what your 80-year-old grandfather did. Go out in the garden and touch the earth. Why? Because Mama Earth is of the nature. You can't bring your arrogance and your anger there. But this is not just about distilling arrogance and anger. This is about actually learning how to nurture, learning how to be a nurturer, learning how to be caring. The reason they call a farmer a husbandman in the Bible is because it takes the same attentiveness that we're talking about here, right? So literally touch the earth. That's all I would say. Walk barefoot as much as you can. Put your hands in the soil, even if you don't have 40 acres and a mule, you just got a patio. Literally put your hand in the soil and touch the earth. I think that's the advice I would give.
Excellent, excellent. Well, this has been an extremely beautiful conversation, beautiful conversation. And again, we know that today represents for some people symbol of love, but as I was stating to us kind of in the background, us as African American people, we are love, right? we exude love, even despite people doing us wrong and circumstances and generations of whatever. We are love. And so what I'm asking everyone in the audience to do is to extend yourself, to be open to love, right? To be open to be vulnerable, to be open to be trusted and trustworthy, to be open to going past and being uncomfortable, because that's what love is. Love is a verb, so it takes action in order for all of us to do these things. But again, thank you so much, Masood, Colin, Rashid, and Ross for coming, joining us today for intimacy. And as again, Imam Fahim Shuaib coined it, into me, you see, this was definitely a soul experience that we had tonight. But if you enjoyed this conversation, definitely share it with your friends, your family. These are conversations that we need to be having with our children as well. You know, we often talk about, you know, breaking generational curses, and curses can't be broken if you don't talk about what is broken, right? So let's talk about the love and what we need to do in order to move to the next level. So, Queens, do you all have anything before we head out?
I'm good. I think the gentleman did it, and you closed it out well. We really appreciate you all coming on. I mean, like you said, you know, just getting it from men, it's just such a big difference on, you know, just the substance of the conversation. So we really appreciate you all coming on.
Yes, and brave souls, because I reached out to many brothers. Let me just say this before we eat. I reached out to many brothers, at least 8 people, and everybody was saying no. And I'm just like, this is a conversation that we have to have. And as we always talk about community building, we forget that community begins with family. And as we have stronger families, we can have stronger community. So brothers, go to the barbershops and have these conversations. Go to the basketball courts and have these conversations. Go fishing and have these conversations. Go to the garden and have these conversations with us, so that we can all begin to have this into me you see experience. And so we want everyone to be sure to like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Instagram. Again, peace and love, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you on next time. And next week, money. All right. Thank you, everybody. Peace.
Wow.